Hello, friends. We've got kind of a unique opportunity here as we wait for parts for a number of the amps that I'm working on right now. I get a chance to work on one of my own amps. And in this case, we've got this 1955 Magnatone. You can't tell from the front because it's missing the little badge. I did a whole series on this amplifier. This was actually the first amplifier I've ever worked on. I learned so much of the beginning early skills that I'm using today on this amplifier. And part of it, involved building a new baffle and, new grill cloth. I learned how to do all of that on this amplifier because it was quite beat up when I got it. And I really, really like this thing. However, I also worked on another similar vintage Magnatone. This is called a 108, by the way, Varsity Deluxe. And I worked on a 108 or a Varsity. I can't remember what it was called, but basically the predecessor to this amplifier, a bit smaller, and it frankly killed this thing for tone. It sounded so much better than this thing did, and I did just a 3-prong swap on it for the guy, and I wanted to buy it, and I thought I was going to be able to buy it, and he decided not to sell it to me. And I've been kind of just chasing that because it was the perfect at-home practice kind of amp. Really great for getting gain out of it without being loud. And it just had a really smooth, dark breakup and was just really lovely. So I've been chasing that with this. I've done a few different things with it. I got the chassis out right now, but one piece I've experimented with is changing out the speaker. So right now it's actually got a Celestian Gold in it with the bell cover removed just because there's not enough room to fit the speaker in here with the bell cover. And yeah, this was just kind of an attempt to see if I would like that tone better, if it would improve it in any way. It had a Weber in it, which had a little rip in the speaker cone. So I just figured I'd try, and frankly, I don't like the speaker in the amp at all, but it could just be that the amp needs some love in other ways. So for now, we'll be keeping it in, but you can kind of see the inside, what it looks like, and really kind of the coolest part of this entire amp is the tube chart, which is just super duper clean. And yeah, as you can see, it's a very, very simple amplifier. Basically as simple as it gets. Think Fender Champ, very similar concept. One preamp tube, one power tube, one rectifier. So simple. So let's go ahead and grab the chassis and see what my work looks like from way back when. And here she is. So a big part of this was just using parts that were already in the amplifier. I didn't change a whole lot, really just the electrolytics and a couple resistors and stuff here, as well as a 3-prong. So there wasn't a ton I did, but again, there's an entire series on my channel of me kind of showing every little detail of this, really learning everything and just giving it a shot, putting myself out there and for better or worse. And this again was really the genesis of me working on amps, and I'm really thankful for this amplifier for that. You can see the faceplate is just really, really cool. Lovely kind of hammered textured finish here. This really neat like teal green color. Varsity Deluxe. I love that these were made in Inglewood, California, which is, very close to me here in Southern California. It's had some unfortunate mods done to it, including this switch here for the power. That's not original, and they kind of installed it slightly crooked. But yeah, it's just a very cool amp. And again, as you can see, extremely simple. It does have a can cap, but we just bypassed it. And you can also see the other mod I did here, which was adding in a little junction box. So the wires off the output transformer are going to the jack in there, and then the jack just allows me to plug in the speaker or run it into a bigger cab, which I was trying out just to see if I liked it better with a different cab. So pretty simple there. And yeah, so, and then the other things, so I guess we can kind of flip it over and look at it. It does have 2 replaced transformers. I didn't know that when I bought it. This is a stand core. Looks like 8-watt universal output. I don't really know the date of this or anything. I'm not sure if there's a easy way to date these. I'm not seeing anything. I don't think 3824. I think it's just a part number. But yeah, so we got that, and then similarly, we've got another stand core for the power transformer here. Pretty dang small, and yeah, I'm not sure exactly if this is, the same spec as the original or whatnot. Just kind of how it came to me, and kind of is what it is, really. So yeah, just a very interesting amplifier, and it's got some decent tubes in it. RCA rectifier, Jan GE6V6. So the power tubes at least shouldn't be a problem. And then the preamp tube, I tried some different ones, and I don't remember what you call this, but yeah, just another vintage part. So kind of what I'm thinking is, now that I've got a bit more of a setup here, actually literally as of today, I just got an isolation transformer, we've got the signal generator, we've got the aux box, we've got my scope, all these tools that I really haven't used and am, looking forward to learning how to use. I figure this is a great place to start because it's very simple, it's easy to track, and there's a good way also for me to experiment a little bit with modding amplifiers and just kind of seeing what different component changes do to the tone. And I'm hoping, I figured out last night, I'm hoping I'll be able to translate that, how to get audio from the UA aux box to the camera so you can hear that. It's quite late already, and my daughter's sleeping, so I can't really play amps, but the aux box I think will allow me to crank up the amp and hear how it sounds, and also let you guys hear how it sounds. So with an actual nice tone versus the amp or the cab maybe 6 feet away from me and you're just hearing the room. So yeah, that's all the plans for this. I don't really have a ton of expectations going into this. I really remember very little of this amplifier, and certainly we have to look at the schematic, but hey, at least I know more than I did then, so I should be able to at least pick out some of it. But there's a lot of things that I kind of know in theory what this does, but I've never heard it, how it changes the tone. For example, the cathode resistors here, setting the bias, or the cathode bypass caps. I know, for example, I think this is a 0.01 maybe, or 0.1, 104K. I need to learn how to read the cap codes, but I know that this is going to not let through as much low end and low mids and all of that. It's going to be mainly high end. So maybe the amp will sound better if I increase the size of this cap a bit, or this other cathode bypass cap right here, which is not part of the schematic if I remember correctly, but was there originally, so I left it. So things like that we can check out. Also bias. I never biased the amplifier. I didn't know how to back then. I didn't have a bias probe. So we can look into that. And yeah, lots of little things like that. So let's get into it. So to kick things off, I think let's just get a little bit of a baseline here. So I've got it hooked up to the aux box just off to the side here. And yeah, I've got my guitar plugged in to the front. So we'll just kind of see how it sounds. Now I've also got the bias probe hooked up because I've never checked the bias on it. So we'll see where we're at. So let's just go ahead and flicker on. All right, so we've let it heat up a bit here. It's still changing a little bit, but this is roughly what it, I think, will settle at. And we're looking at 285 volts for the plate voltage and plate current 29. And that gives us a extremely cool 58.8% plate dissipation for a 6V6 tube. So this is biased very cool. Very, very cool. And yeah, so that might explain some of the issue. This is cathode bias, so this should really be biased at 100%. And we're nowhere near that. So we'll definitely have to be adjusting the resistor. I'll point it out real quick if I can find my non-conductive stick. There it is. So this resistor right here in this cap, this is the bias circuit. And it looks like 3. So this is a 330 ohm resistor here, and we probably need to drop it a decent amount to get that right. So very interesting. I don't think I have anything in a value that's big enough for that, but we'll check. And yeah, so that again, that's I guess a good sign and a bad sign. Good sign that's something easy to fix that could potentially really wake this amp up. So now I'm gonna go ahead and transition. I have to unplug the mic. My mic go into the camera, so you won't be able to hear me talk, but we'll switch over to the aux box so we can hear how it sounds. All right, there you guys heard it. Just playing my Jazz Master here. And yeah, you can hear it just gets totally crazy and caves in on itself when it's turned all the way up. Otherwise, pretty clean. And yeah, it sounds fine. It sounds okay. It definitely sounds better through the aux box with that cab than it did through the gold and the stock cab. So just so you guys know, what I'm using was a 1x12 Fender Deluxe Reverb style cabinet. Very simple setup, just a tiny bit of plate reverb on there. So yeah, sounded pretty good, but obviously could be much better. Doesn't really have a whole lot going on, pretty weak, and then all of a sudden turns into like a collapsible fuzz. Though it is very dynamic. You heard hopefully me rolling back the volume or just picking light, and does clean up. And then when you really hit it on the low notes, it just kind of blooms out. So anyways, that's our starting point. So we know the bias is super cold, and that's about it. So let's continue on and dig a bit deeper. So for testing purposes, I've got just a 1 watt 470 ohm resistor there, and we've got it wired, or test leads in parallel with the 330 ohm, and that's giving us about 200 ohms. And so we were running obviously quite cool before, so we're going to just go ahead and fire this up really quickly and see if this gets us kind of in the ballpark of what we're looking for. This is not going to be the final, obviously, but we can do some testing here and play around with this amp a little bit more than we would with, a nicer vintage amp, customer's amp, anything like that. So let's just go ahead and fire it up and see what we got. And looks like 280/36. That only brings us to about 72%. So we're still a ways off here. So let's see what else we've got. So don't obviously do what I'm doing at home. I'm just experimenting here, but I've added a second 470 ohm in parallel. So you've got 3 resistors in parallel, all 1 watts, and all 3 together is giving us about 150 whatever ohms. So somewhere in that neighborhood. And let's see if that gets us a bit closer or not. And we're still a ways off. Look at that, 79. So we're only at 79% plate dissipation with all of that. Let's take a look at what the schematic calls for. So we'll see right here, it does say 330. So I guess it was meant to be biased really cool, I guess. So obviously this did not work. We need a much lower value resistor, which I'm very surprised by, because again, the schematic calls for a 330 ohm. But we've got this I pulled from my AC30. The 64 AC30, this is a 75 ohm, and this might be right on the money because we were at, what was it, about 70% plate dissipation there with the 150 ohm, and it's not linear as you change the value. So this might be too much or it might be dead on the money. We'll give this a shot and find out, but we will have to desolder one side of this, so no big deal. Let's just go ahead and do that real quick. And we did discharge the caps. I just forgot to record that part, but I did do that. So for the bias cap, we'll go ahead and install this mod 25 microfarad 50 volt. The schematic calls for the 20 microfarad, so that's fine. Cool, so we're good to go now for a quick little semi-janky test here. We've got the bias cap installed, just tacked in really, and then we've got the resistor up here. We're going to just check the voltage it gives on the multimeter, and then also the plate voltage and plate current, and we'll pull up the calculator so we can check real quick. Hopefully it's not going to be too much. We'll know pretty quickly if it is. So let's go ahead and fire it up, see what we got. So remember, we had 277 volts and about 40 for plate current before, 87%. So we're still not getting 100%. I'm really surprised by that, to be honest. So we went from 330 ohms down to 75 ohms. I feel like I must be missing something, but I'm not sure what. I feel like we should play it and just see what it sounds like. Man, I really hope the aux box audio comes across okay through the camera. It's really nice having that. For me, just very, very helpful. And yeah, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if it really improved things. It's been some time since I did the first little play test of the original resistor in there. But, we're still not even close to 100% really. If we're at 75 ohm and the most we got out of that was 89%, what do we got to get down to? 50 ohm, I would say, somewhere in that range. Uh, just a bit surprising to me, to be honest. So this is by far the lowest, highest wattage resistor I have. Lowest ohm, highest wattage. So we're just going to go ahead and install it, finish the install with the cap there, and move on. And then next order I do, I might get some. I need to honestly buy a bunch of these higher wattage resistors for cathode bias amps anyways, so no big deal. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and move on from there and start tackling things like the cathode bypass caps over here and potentially the resistor values. So let's get to that. Here's the tube we were using. Again, a Jan GE, very nice tube, but quite old. I don't know how to read the date codes there, 426 188-5. Now I'd like to focus on the preamp section here, which is a crazy chaotic mess, no question about it. And we're looking here at the schematic, and we can see we got the 3 input jacks. You can see the 3 there. And let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. We got 100Ks off of each. So 1, 2, 3, 100Ks off of each. And then we can see here the 12AX7. You got the 2 halves of the 12AX7 here. And the first half we can see off of the cathode here is a 3K resistor. And so the 3K resistor is a 3.3K in this case. And so that's off of pin, should be 3. Yeah, pin 3. And then, so basically this is setting the bias for that half of the 12AX7, or I guess the people call it the center point. Terminology I'm still trying to learn here. And then we've got a cathode bypass cap that was added on. So originally had no cathode bypass cap, but we can see somebody put in a 10 microfarad 63 volt. So that's fine. And then the other half, which has the same kind of section with the other end of the cathode here, we've got this resistor, which is a, looks like a 2.2K. And according to the schematic, it should be a 2K. So that's fine. And I believe the higher the resistance, the kind of cooler the bias, if you will. And then this cap right here is serving the role as the 0.1 according to the schematic. And I'm gonna have to Google it real quick what this code means, 104K. Again, I don't know what that means. It could be a 0.1, 0.01, I'm not 100% sure. I'll figure that out here in a second, but I think what I want to do is experiment with perhaps this section and play around a little bit with the values here. So we've got these two. This one's already got a cathode bypass cap that's quite a bit larger than stock. So what happens if we mess with this one, and what happens if we change the bias resistor from 2.2K to maybe a 1K, 1.5K, something like that. I've always been curious of what that equates to in tone. I've heard people talk about it, but I'd like to hear it for myself. So we're going to go ahead and give that a shot tonight. And unfortunately, past Tanner completely hooked around the leads here to make it pretty difficult to get these out. I don't think it's going to be super easy. And I don't want to totally remove them because these pins are pretty fragile. So what I'm going to go for actually instead is making it so that the these components are just kind of shielded off, and then we'll tack in or just alligator clip in some other components to see what's what. So let's get to it. All right, cool. So we've got those two disconnected here, and we'll just kind of have those floating in the air, and we can go ahead and alligator clip in the components we want to test. So let's go ahead and get that set up. All right, disclaimers out of the way. Obviously, don't do this. This is just me experimenting here. But we've got the 2.2K resistor going to ground as if it was just hooked up normally. That's via this white alligator clip. And then the black alligator clip is coming off of the pin to the positive side of the cap, and the negative side is also connected to ground alongside with the 2.2K, both to chassis. And I've got my multimeter here just to kind of monitor things. And yeah, so let's just go ahead, flip it on, and make sure everything's okay, and then we'll grab a guitar. Massive difference there. Holy cow. Yeah, so as you can hear, a cathode bypass cap, the greater the capacitance, in this case going from 0.1 to 25.1 microfarads to 25 microfarads, resulted in a huge jump in gain, in volume, suddenly, usable, much lower down here, wasn't super anemic sounding, and very little clean headroom. Boosts all of the frequencies, or it really doesn't boost, it allows to continue to pass through the signal, all of the frequencies versus the 0.1, which is really just pushing the upper frequencies. So if you want more clean headroom and you want a bit of a brighter sound, less low mids, less low and bloat, you want a smaller cathode bypass cap in this case, in this particular amplifier. Or if you want something a bit more aggressive and a bit, I guess, a bit warmer too, then that seemed to do the trick. So I'm pretty happy with that, actually. I really want to hear what it sounds like through the cab, but it's far, far too late to be doing that. So we're not going to bother. But I'm very happy with that so far. So now what I want to do is go ahead and test a different resistor value and see what that does. So right now we've got a 2.2K. And let's go ahead and throw in a 1.5K and see if that makes any noticeable difference. So I'm going to go ahead and just record something. I'll just set the amp, everything at noon. And we'll see how that sounds. And then I'll leave it there. We'll swap over the resistor. And then I'll play again. And we'll see if it makes any big difference or not. So let's check. So we've got the 2.2K and the 0.1 bypassed. And we're running everything through this 1.5K. And this 25 microfarad cathode bypass cap. So we'll go ahead and record that, and then we'll rehook up the 2.2K and go back and forth. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Wow. Okay. So my initial takeaways, it's a bit hard to say. I'd like to listen back, but immediately I think my favorite just gut reaction tone was the 25 microfarad bypass cap added in the stock 2.2K resistor. The combination of the 25 microfarad in the 1.5K resistor, and it could just be, I mean, wasn't a huge difference to me, but it did sound a little bit much, I would say. But maybe actually that might be exactly what I would be looking for with the amp through its own speaker. And yeah, and then the stock setup, or at least the stock value setup, is very anemic in comparison. And you've got to turn it basically 3/4 of the way up to get where it's at halfway. So how does that actually, change volume wise? Like, is it purely just a setting on the knob? Or is there a big difference in the volume in the room? I'm not sure. It's always a little deceptive when you're running the direct with like an aux box or anything like that. It's the actual volume does not translate very well in my experience. So that'll be something we'll have to figure out with a speaker. But we're going to end here tonight, and I'm really actually pleased with the progress we made. Obviously, the bias is not dialed in 100%, but very fascinating listening to the changes those make to the tone. And yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to end here, but I don't think the series or this little mini series of me experimenting on this amp is over. There's definitely more to be done here. So subscribe if you guys want to see what that looks like and follow along. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, see you guys.